Presenting Dr. Brad McRae, CSP, author of 6 books and platinum-level presenter. Here's Brad live.
Thank you. What I'm interested in is where leadership, negotiation, and presentation come together in a way that's absolutely seamless. So seamless, in fact, that you can't tell where one starts and the other one begins. Now, there's some people that have one of those skill sets, fewer people that have 2 of those skill sets, but it's a rarity to find people that have all 3 of those. So although we're talking about negotiation, in the background, how well you negotiate depends on the way you communicate and the way you present and how well we lead. We fly a lot, and one of the things that makes flying so safe is that our captain and first officer have a checklist. What would they have on the checklist? What would you hope that they would check before the plane takes off? Fuel would be good. The navigation system's working. The fuel level is right. The tires are okay. Now sorry? Air. Yeah. All right. Now, suppose that our captain and first officer, even though they're really good, on this particular morning said, listen, we've done this flight millions of times. We're the top gun on Air Canada. We're celebrated pilots. We're as good as Captain Sully. And so that particular morning, our pilot, Heather, goes and gets a double espresso. She's checking her many references on Facebook. And the first officer is reading the newspaper. Now, if you knew that, you would not want to get on that plane. So just as our pilot and first officer have their checklist, master negotiators have their checklist. And you all have a copy of my book, and in the book is a master negotiator's preparation form. Now, there are 2 types of negotiation. How many? 2. Not too bad. This is the interactive part. There are 2. How many types of negotiations? 2. All right. Now, the first is, in fact, a negotiation that we can prepare for. Your name is? Josephine. So Josephine is working on the most important negotiation of her entire life. If this turns out successfully, the law firm will double. Her salary will quadruple. She will have a corner office and be a multiple millionairess. Now, how carefully is Josephine going to prepare for that negotiation? Very carefully. And so that's why we have 3 ways to prepare. The first is the Master Negotiator's Preparation Form. Now, the problem with most courses is that less than 10% of what we teach actually transfers to the real world. Now, if this was elementary school math, that would be a failing grade. However, in the book, you have the Master Negotiator's Preparation Form. So you don't have to remember it. It's all there. And if you want an electronic copy, email me and I'll send you one. So Josephine has filled that form out more carefully than she's ever filled out a form in her entire life. Now, what's happened to her confidence? It's gone up. Now, as bright as she is, there may be a trade-off, a concession, or by changing a couple of words in that opening statement, and it'll make it 90% more likely that she will be successful. So the second thing that she's going to use, because we know that she wants this so bad and she's very well prepared, is that she has her yellow pages. So she calls Marianne, she calls Kelly, and she calls Earl. And they may give her a trade-off concession, change a couple words in the opening statement, and now she's feeling even more prepared. What's happened to her confidence? It's gone up. Now, because this is so important, now would you do this for every negotiation at work? No, you'd never go home. Some of you don't go home now, but you would never go home. So the third thing that she's going to do to make sure that she's actually well prepared is she's going to role-play that negotiation. Now, she's going to role-play that negotiation from whose party's point of view? The other side and her own. Why is the other side so important? You want to find out what your arguments sound like. Your name is? Christy. Crystal? Crystal.
Krusty.
Okay. I'll take it. I'll take it. Now, you live where?
In Toronto.
In Toronto. Now, you don't know it, but you know that the theater in Toronto where they had the Phantom of the Opera? This woman, on January 15th, is going to star in Shakespeare's most famous romantic play, Romeo and Juliet. And she's wanted that role forever. Now, is she going to show up opening night and say, "Here I am"? I don't think so. She's going to go to rehearsal after rehearsal after rehearsal, because if Romeo here flubs a line, you'll be able to continue and people might not even know. So, 3 methods of preparation. The Master Negotiator's preparation form, the yellow pages. What are your yellow pages?
Your networking.
Your networking. People that they're going to have some ideas that you might not have, that you might not thought of in a million years, or they'll think of a trade-off, a concession, a creative solution. They'll change the opening statement, 90% more likely. And because this is so critically important, it is going to be role-played by both parties' point of view. At this point, how confident is Judge? That's what I was going to say, Josephine. How confident is she? Okay, now how important is that confidence? Very. Let me tell you my favorite story about confidence. 4 years ago, we got Lizzie the dog. Lizzie is half my dog and half my daughter's dog. Now I ask you, who cleans up after the dog?
You.
Who lets the dog out at night?
You.
Who takes the dog for a walk?
You.
Now, we took the dog to dog obedience training. Now, who's dog obedience training really for? Yes. Well done. Now, remember, Katie wants to be Prime Minister of Canada, very sociable, didn't spend any time training Lizzie. So we go into the thing, and I should tell you that Lizzie has attention deficit disorder. No matter how much attention you give her, it's never enough. So Lizzie is there, Katie's trying her to get to do stuff, she's not having any of it. Now, the person who's leading the class, Heather, takes over. And in 5 minutes, this is a different animal. Lizzie is behaving beautifully. How come?
Because she had confidence.
She had confidence. What else? She knows what she's doing. Okay, dogs are very hierarchical. So the alpha person in the room, the most confident, the best person was? Heather. And the dog is behaving beautifully. Now, if a dog with an IQ of 24 can figure out how confident you are, it's not going to take very long for the person across the table. So the first type of negotiation is, in fact, a negotiation that we can do what? Prepare for. And we're going to prepare as well as we possibly can. Now, here's a skill testing question. What's the second type of negotiation? Very good. Ones that we can't prepare for. And these are ones that are impromptu or spontaneous. And how well we do depends on our intuition, or as Malcolm Gladwell says, our rapid cognition. If you want to know more about that, there's a wonderful book called Blink. So I'm going to illustrate one of the stories in that book. And sir, can you come up and help me, please? Yes, you. Okay, your name is? Wayne. All right. I'm introducing you to Chief Wayne. And Wayne, you're from?
Baker McKenzie.
No. Where do you live?
Oh,
sorry. See how well trained he is? All right. Okay. Now, Wayne is the chief of the Toronto Fire Department.
Woo.
All right? Okay. And you're going to put out a fire right before this very group, and your life depends on how well you select the next 2 people on your team. So I want you to select 2 people on your team who are going to help you put out this fire. Your life depends on it.
My life depends on it.
Yeah, hurry up. This fire's burning.
Okay, I'll pick you. And I will pick you.
Romeo.
Yeah, Romeo.
All right. Romeo, come on up here. Romeo. All right. Romeo, come on. You're not acting, Romeo. This is real life. All right. Now, Mayor Miller has called you. His popularity isn't very good right now.
No.
This is very important because it's a very historic building. In fact, it's the theater where our actress is going to be Juliet. So you got to get it out.
Okay.
So you've picked up your fire hose. Okay. Now you're behind him on the right. You're behind him on the left. Okay. Now you're putting tons of water on that fire. So oh, that's funny. There we go. I didn't want you blinded while you're putting out the fire. Okay, so lots of action, guys. Come on. Oh, very good, Romeo. Lots of action. Now, whoa. Okay. Whoa. Hey, this is my show. Now, expletive deleted. All of a sudden, you force your two cohorts to leave. Exit, stage left. Okay. Now, stop. We're going to rewind the tape. Okay. Heather, you've got the zapper, so we just press rewind for us. Come on, so rewind, come back here. So we're going to try to figure out what was going on here, why all of a sudden, in the middle of putting out this fire, these gentlemen left. So you're back in action, you're putting out the fire. You can go back to action. You're putting out the fire. All right. Now, all of a sudden, Wayne's feet are getting very warm. It's not athlete's foot. He should be able to hear the roar of the flames. He can't. They have put on 4.26 tons of water, and the fire isn't going out. Skill testing question for our audience. Where's the fire?
Behind them.
No. Under them. And the floor is about to collapse. So you've saved your life, congratulations. You saved Romeo's life, and you've saved John's life. Well done. Now, did our chief have time to put all that information together before he made that snap judgment that this wasn't safe? Did he have time to think, okay, no. So what was it that made him think we got to get out of here? His intuition. All right? That's called seasoned judgment, just like Captain Sully, who landed that plane on the Hudson River. Well done.
Thank you.
And we have that on the movie, yes? Okay, so you're going to be able to see that. You're going to be able to see that on the Rick Mercer reports. All right. In point of fact, most of our negotiations are made up of both types. No matter how well prepared Josephine is for this negotiation, what does she have to expect? The unexpected. So you want to be very well prepared, but we have to be able to go with the flow. So most negotiations we can prepare for, and we also have the unexpected. Now, when I wrote this book, and I like this book a lot, I interviewed 21 of the top negotiators across Canada. I had taken all of the courses they have at Harvard on negotiation. I had written another book. I had done all kinds of teaching all over the world. And I cannot put into words how much I learned by interviewing 21 of the best negotiators across this country. So when you read the book, it's like sitting down and personally talking to them. And it was really one of the most enlightening things that I ever did. Let me just tell you one of the stories. There's a woman in the book named Janet Connors. And Janet Connors is an AIDS activist. And what happened is her husband Randy had hemophilia. Now, if you have hemophilia, the likelihood that you can get life insurance is zip. And her husband Randy had about 6 months to live. And they didn't know anything about HIV and AIDS at that point in time. They thought it was a gay man's or intravenous drug user's disease. They didn't think women could get it. So, of course, she had unprotected sex and she got it. So she went to see the Minister of Health for the province of Nova Scotia, named George Moody, and she asked if they could get compensation. Now, there's only 14 families. And he said, let me think about it. Now, she came back 5 weeks later, and she automatically knew what the answer was, because he had the answer in the envelope. How did she know in the blink of an eye what the answer was? Body language. So where is he looking? Down. Is he looking happy? Is he smiling? Because he's about to give bad news. So she knew she had 3 seconds to change his mind. So she said, my husband Randy will be dead in 6 months. Our house is a memory box for our 6-year-old son, Gus. Please do not take his memory box away. That's a fairly emotional appeal. I thought as negotiators we wanted to get rid of the emotion. Is that accurate? No. You want to have the right amount of emotion with the right person at the right time. With Dr. Spock here, no emotion. But this was a very heartfelt appeal. Now, what did she have going against her? Well, it turns out that our Minister of Health for Nova Scotia had a gentleman's agreement with every Minister of Health, federally and provincially, clear across the country. And the gentleman's agreement was not to compensate. Now, we're not talking about a lot of cases. Why did they have that agreement?
One settles, the other don't.
It sets a precedent. All right? So she said, listen, my husband's fear, he's going to be dead in 6 months, is that we're going to lose our house. Our house has a memory box for our 6-year-old son, Gus. Please do not take his memory box away. The minister reached down, tore up the envelope, and Nova Scotia became the first place in North America where people who were infected with HIV were compensated. Now, why did that happen? And I tell you, the other ministers of health, federally and provincially, were not at all happy with you. Why did he do it? Okay, so he was compassionate. Why else? It was the right thing to do. He's a father. He has a house. And it's also a very Nova Scotian thing to do. So what she created was common ground. Master negotiators are 4 times more likely to create common ground. Anyway, you can read about her story and the other people in the book. We need a definition of negotiation. So the definition I would like to propose is that a negotiation takes place anytime 2 or more people are communicating. And at least one of those parties has a goal or an end result in mind. And they can't achieve it until they get permission, consent, or something tangible with the other parties. So just in your own mind, with that very broad definition, so formal, informal, planned, spontaneous, and the time preparing for negotiations, how much time do you spend negotiating at work? All day. And I would hazard a guess that some of those negotiations are much more difficult than others. However, there's a law called the law of non-resistance. I'm trying to get this into my head. But it's everybody who comes across our path is there for a reason, to teach us about our own talents and skills. So if we look at it correctly, no matter how difficult and obnoxious and horrid this Glenn Close person is, from Fatal Attractions, if we're smart, we'll learn from that. And it may be just to avoid him. Okay, now, what do we negotiate? We negotiate agreements because agreements make relationships work. All you have to do is break an important agreement, and that will be a testament to that. Now, how well you, how well I, how well all of us do in our careers depends on how well we architect, and I'm using that word on purpose, on how well we architect creative agreements, creative solutions. Now, I found out from my daughter that it's one thing to have an agreement. It's another thing to have it actually be committed to take it out. So not only do we have to negotiate the agreement, we have to negotiate commitments so people will carry out those agreements. Now, if you go to the supermarket and you buy 2 liters of milk, what's it going to have up at the top? Best before date. Well, agreements have best before dates. So we have to architect agreements, we have to get commitment, but we also have to be aware of when agreements are no longer working and those agreements need to be changed. How well we do depends on the assumptions that we make about this process that we call negotiation. This little film clip tells a lot about the assumptions that we make.
Go.
social anthropologists say that 90% of what we think, 9-0, is culturally and linguistically determined. It depends on the culture, and it depends on the language. All you have to do is go into a foreign culture, and it's very clear how important culture is in knowing how that culture works. Now, Deb, you're a wealthy North American. You go to Mexico, and you see a sombrero that Senora Marilla is selling. Who has the power in the negotiation? No. No. Because she's a North American. She doesn't really know what that sombrero is worth. You know what the sombrero is worth. She says, I'll give you half price. You say 70%. You get down to 60%. Your feet, just stand up and take a bow. You got the sombrero for 60%. You're feeling very proud of yourself. Nice hands. You knew you could sell it for 20%. As you had all day long, and this was the biggest killing you meant today. Take a bow. Now, we know how that works with foreign cultures. It's also true of professional cultures. Anybody here from HR? Okay. There's an HR culture. And if you're going to deal with HR, you need to be able to speak and understand the HR culture. There is a legal culture. There's a culture that lawyers have. And if you're going to deal with lawyers, you need to understand their culture. So it's very important that we understand not only foreign cultures, but also we're very prepared to negotiate with different professional cultures. In fact, one of the companies that I've done a lot of work for, Fortune 500 company, head office in Greenville, South Carolina, the sales department calls the credit department the non-sales department. But if credit didn't do their job, they wouldn't be able to manufacture the tires that sales sells. So we have to really understand and work together collaboratively. Okay, together we're going to climb the ladder of knowledge. The first rung on the ladder of knowledge is information. How many of you have children? Just raise your hands. And the rest of you, I suspect that you were a child at one point. So, 23 years ago, I myself was a perfect parent. I would go into the superstore and I would see your daughter have a temper tantrum for chocolate-covered Cocoa Puffs. And I'd say to my wife, Lynn, that is disgusting. They have no control over that child. Mark my words, if we ever have children, no child of ours will ever behave that way in public. Now, you can imagine how many times I've had to eat those words. Now, we had lots of information. I myself had taught child psychology. Wife is a physician with young families. So we brought Andrew home from the hospital. We put him in the bedroom. Now, you know they breathe very erratically. So as soon as he stopped breathing, we would wake up to make sure that he was still alive. We became more and more sleep deprived. After 3 weeks, we put Andrew in his own bedroom, and he was alive in the morning. At 6 months, we mastered parenthood. We hired Laura, the babysitter. We went out. We came home, and Andrew was alive. However, 2.5 years later, we had our daughter, Catherine. Now, Andrew is a very exuberant chap. You have to yell. Well, you know what he's like. You have to yell at Andrew to get his attention. With Catherine, if you raised your voice ever so slightly, she would burst into tears. So what worked with child 1 didn't work with child number 2. Is there anybody in the room, and raise your hands really high if you have 3 or more children? Very high. Look at these. No, keep your hand up. Look at these people very carefully. If you give them enough beer or enough wine, they will tell you that 2 of the children are theirs, and the 3rd or 4th was a switch at the hospital, because there was no way that their gene pool could produce anybody as different than the others. That child is affectionately known, the one that causes you 90% of your headaches and heartaches, as our special child. Now, as we move up the ladder of knowledge, it's one thing to have information. It's another thing to have the skills to use it. The same skills that work with your 4-year-old will not work with your 14-year-old and will not work with your 24-year-old when he or she wants to move home so they can save up to buy a house. The next rung on the ladder of knowledge is judgment. And the type of judgment we're talking about is seasoned judgment, knowing how to do the right thing in the right way at the right time. And a monument to that is Captain Scully, who landed that Airbus on the Hudson River. And the last rung on the ladder of knowledge is wisdom. So we take into account the history of the relationship, but also, as you said, what's your name again? Yes?
Marilyn?
Marilyn said, every time we negotiate, we set a precedent. So we want to make sure that we don't want to do something today that works for us today but is going to cause big problems tomorrow. We want to be strategic. Now, when I got up this morning, I put my watch on this wrist, crystal up. Did I negotiate with myself, left wrist, right wrist, crystal up, crystal down? No, you just do it. So that habit saves us a lot of time. When we get better, when we negotiate, we can give ourselves a choice. And the master negotiators that you can read about in this book just didn't give themselves a choice, they gave themselves a strategic choice. Let me talk about one of the people in the book, and his name is Frank King. And Frank King is a man that brought the 1988 Winter Olympics to Calgary, Alberta. One of the most strategic people I've ever met. Now, when I wrote this book, I didn't know anybody in Alberta, and my publisher said they sell books in Alberta, so you got to get somebody in Alberta in the book. So what pages did I use? Yellow pages. And my friend Jeff said, you got to interview Frank King. Now, I have a research assistant, and I'll give you her email for 25 cents. And, I mean, $25 actually. She's amazing. Because when it comes to finding information, she's a cross between Sherlock Holmes and a pit bull. And so I had very, very good information to do these interviews. And as a result, the interviews were much better because they knew that I knew what I was talking about. Before Calgary, is anybody from Calgary here? Yes? Okay. Can you just stand up for a second, please? Okay. So you're the mayor of Calgary. Congratulations. Okay. Now, do we have a Vancouverite? I need a fake Vancouverite. Sir, would you stand up? All right. Now, you want to get the Olympics for where? Calgary. You want to get the Winter Olympics for? Vancouver. Now, there's a meeting, and all of these people over here in the expensive section are the Canadian Organizing Committee. And our person from Vancouver, Mark, starts in a way that's very strategic because it's down to these two cities within Canada before it goes international. And Mark says to the committee, ladies and gentlemen, smile, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I believe that you will agree with me that the Olympics should be awarded to our great city of Vancouver. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, we have a strategic advantage over Calgary. Things aren't looking very good. And the strategic advantage is that we already have some Olympic-level facilities that are already built. And the committee is now smiling because that's going to say, smile? Smile? That's going to, the committee is impressed. Now you should smile back. Okay. And it has nothing to do with the bribe. Now, we're at a choice point. A choice point is a crucial point in the negotiation. And if our heroine, Charlene, does the right thing in the right way at the right time, you will win it for Calgary. But if you do the wrong thing in the wrong way at the wrong time, Mark, who's bribed them, will win it. So you want to be very strategic, and you are. And so Charlotte says, in her very best French accent from grade 12, au contraire. Now, the French people in the jury, just raise your hands. I mean, some of you pretend, okay? Okay, very, very good. Are totally impressed. And then you use one of the 21 skills that are on this bookmark. And you strategically pick number 16, which is?
Reframe.
Reframe. And you said, au contraire, I believe we have a strategic advantage because we will build brand new, state-of-the-art facilities. And I'm pleased to say that the Winter Olympics were awarded to Calgary in 1988. And you're going to get them later, so you're getting them in 2010. Okay. But do you see how strategic Charlotte was? And I just finished a book on the 7 strategies of master leaders, where I interviewed 21 of the best leaders across Canada. And they were incredibly strategic. So skill number 16 is reframe. I'll tell you one more story about the Olympics. In any negotiation, what do you have to expect? The unexpected. There was an election in Calgary. Can you just come up here for a second, John? This is before he was a fireman in Toronto. And I'd like to introduce you to Mayor Ralph Klein. The guy who said, you know, send all the Easterners back home. Anyway, so Ralph was a bit of a bully. And there was an agreement. So you're going to be Ralph, you're going to be Frank King now.
We're going to have a split personality.
Already has one.
Oh, exactly.
Okay. So this is Frank King. Now they had an agreement. Remember, agreements make relationships work? So would you shake hands, please? And the agreement was that this was going to be a smaller committee. It wasn't going to be like the Montreal Olympics that took 30 years or 40 years to pay off. And it was going to be run mostly by people in business. There are going to be 2 people from the city of Calgary, 2 people from the provincial government of Alberta, and 2 people from the federal government. And each level of government is kicking in $2 million. And you need that money because now that you've won, you and Charlotte have won, you have to go to Europe and you have to put on an amazing show to convince the Europeans that the Olympics should in fact be in Canada. And the Europeans kind of stick together. So you need that money. Now in every negotiation, what do we have to expect? Ralph says, you can have the $2 million, son, but only if we have 4 people on the committee. And if we don't have 4 people on the committee, you get 0. Now this is critical. What does our star here, what does our protagonist say to Ralph Klein?
3.
Okay, so we can compromise at 3. So you can have 3 and we'll get $3 million. However, that will set a
Precedent.
and if you give Ralph an inch, he's going to take a mile. So is there another option? Yes?
You can get better value for $1, I don't know, for 2.
Okay, we get better value for $1.
Or say it's going to cost you.
It's going to cost you. Okay. In some cases, negotiations aren't rational. You know that. I know that. So what Frank King did, he went with his BATNA. You might want to write this down. BATNA, B-A-T-N-A, our best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And we're only as strong at the table as our BATNA away from the table. So first of all, he disarmed him, which is?
Disarm.
We know what number?
Oh, 17.
17. So we're working up. 16 is? And 17 is?
Disarm.
So very good. And he said, you can have 4 people. However, I gave my word that there would be 2. And if I have to break my word, I have to resign. Are you prepared to take over the chairpersonship of this committee and go to Europe in 2 weeks? And Ralph said, no. He called his bluff. Thank you very much. So what this illustrates is that we have to know when to negotiate, we have to know how to negotiate, and equally important and often more difficult is when not to negotiate. When, in fact, to go with our BATNA. All right. The master negotiator's mantra is that you can't change somebody's mind if you don't know where their mind is. You can't change somebody's mind if you don't know where their mind is. Patrick, would you help me for a second, please? Patrick, you're from? You're from Toronto. All right. Where did you study negotiation skills?
Chicago.
Chicago. Well, I studied them at Harvard. Do you have a PhD?
2.
2. Okay, so put your hands up. He does. I know he has 2. You know, you go on those online thing, 2 degrees, 50... Anyway. So, Donald, I'm right, and you're wrong. So I'm going to force Donald, not yet, I'm going to force Donald to see the situation the way I see it. The way any sane, rational, well-educated person would. And as I try to force him to see the situation the way I see it, he does what? No, come on. He pushes back. All right. So that didn't work. So I'm going to push harder. What's he going to do? Push harder back. Okay. Now, Donald, I didn't tell you that the Fortune 500 company I work for is Michelin. These shoes have Formula One racing tires. Put your hands up like that. Okay. All right. Now, instead of trying to force him, in polite company, we just met. What are we likely to do? Shake hands. Okay, so this is the Master Negotiator's mantra, and I want to anchor this so you'll never forget it. So I want you all to stand up, and I want you to find a partner. Use your hand sanitizer. I want you to shake hands. I want you to shake hands. I want you to repeat out loud the Master Negotiator's mantra. Let's go. You cannot change somebody's mind if you don't know where their mind is. Okay. Find a new partner. New partner. One more time. New partner. You cannot change somebody's mind if you don't know where their mind is. All right. All right. Remember that because we're going to use it later in the presentation. Now, the first strategy is we want to build the world with creative rather than wasteful solutions. And Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same kind of thinking that created it. I want you to come with me to Mexico City. And we're going to take a look at the Mexico City airport negotiation. We have Senora Mirella, who has now been promoted. She's been elected the mayor of Mexico City. Nice round of applause. And she has a goal. And she wants to build a brand new state-of-the airport for Mexico City. It's the most important city in Latin America. Now that's her position. Her position is that I will build a new airport. Now, what are her underlying interests? Interests answer the question, why do we want it? What's one reason why our proud mayor wants a new airport? Help me out here. It would increase tourism. Good. A second reason. Industry would create jobs, and it would be called the Senora Mirella International Airport de Mexico. Now, prestige. Very good. Now, in every negotiation, there's an obstacle. I want to get from here to here. Right now, this table is in my way, so there's an obstacle. So, I would like to introduce you to your obstacle. This is Senora Brenda. Now, Brenda is the Minister of Health for the federal government of Mexico. And Brenda is dead set against building a new airport. Now, that's her position. What are 4 of her underlying reasons? What's one reason why she doesn't want a new airport? It's already the most polluted city in North America. Number 2, where does she want to put the money? Healthcare. Number 3, the rates of asthma are increasing amongst the children. Now, I would like you to look at her, point, and scowl. Very good. Very good. Excellent. Meryl Streep couldn't have done better. You have an intense, and I mean intense, personal and political dislike for our esteemed mayor. Now, both people have taken a very strong position. I will have an airport over my dead body. Now, when people get positional, they tend to dig into their positions. So you hire a team of consultants, and And they provide you with reams and reams of data, leather bound, that support your contention that there should be
An airport.
an airport. In physics, for every action, there's an equal and opposite. And you have reams and reams of data, leather bound, gold on the side, that support your contention. Now, can people always negotiate? The answer is no. So they hired a wise woman. Your name is? Joanne. Joanne is a wise woman from Harvard. She's a mediator. She's an environmentalist. She knows government regulations. She is one sharp cookie. Now, she comes down and she looks at all of the material and she says, you both make very strong arguments. She's allowed them to save a little bit of face. And when people say face, they're a little bit more flexible. Now, our wise woman from Harvard, Joanne, knows that there are two. How many? Two. Primary solutions. One is substantive. What are the details of the deal? And you could say, I've read everything and I favor the new airport. You could say, I read everything and this isn't the right time. The money should go into health care. Or we could have the great Canadian compromise. You can build half an airport. You can build half a hospital. However, Joanne knows that there is a second type of solution that is underutilized. It is called a process solution. If we can't agree on the outcome, can we agree on the process? And she says, listen, what I suggest is you have a 5-year moratorium. Buy the property if you need to. In 5 years, hire some neutral scientists that would advise you to build, not build, or another moratorium. Ladies and gentlemen, that was 39 years ago. To date, Mexico City hasn't built a new airport. They've improved their existing airport, and in the process, they have saved billions and billions and billions of pesos. Anybody here from Montreal? No, yeah, they knew what was coming. In Montreal, 30 years ago, they built a brand new airport called Mirabel. It was called the Airport of the Future. It was a $70 cab ride then. Nobody used it. It was a white elephant. Millions and millions of our taxpayers' dollars that could have gone into the infrastructure, healthcare, or education were entirely wasted. So these two stories illustrate our fact that we can build a future with creative or wasteful solutions. Safe communities, Brampton, Ontario, increasing rates of violence amongst cab drivers and convenience store owners. The most common solution is to hire more police. No money and not likely to be in the right place at the right time. So if it were possible, they moved the cab stand in front of the convenience store. They looked after each other. The crime rates went down. The baseball strike, 1994 and 1995, who lost? Baseball, the fans, airlines, hotels, the people that worked, everybody lost. Now at Harvard they had a very neat solution, and instead of a strike they would have a virtual strike. So you are the wealthy owners, multimillionairesses. So what happened in the virtual strike, because these are the wealthy players, the owners would only get enough money to cover your expenses. Any money that's left over is put in Charlotte's bank and is held in trust. You're the wealthy players. You only get enough money to cover your expenses. Any money that's left over is put in Charlotte's bank and is held in trust. Now, would that by itself settle the dispute? The answer is no. What we need is a trigger. So strategically, how can we make it so that it's more in the party's interest to settle than not settle? That's what a trigger is. Are you with me? Somebody have a cell phone I could borrow just for a sec? Sure. Okay, so this was years ago when I got my first cell phone. You had to have an accountant with a spreadsheet. You needed an electrical engineer. It was just really confusing. And I didn't know what I was doing. So I was in New Glasgow working for Michelin, and I saw the best salesperson ever. And what Sandy did is she said, listen, I think this is the phone you need, because she found out what my interests were. Now, am I going to buy the phone in New Glasgow, or am I going to go back to Halifax and buy it? Go back to Halifax and buy it because I can take it back to you if you sold it to me. At which point, Sandy pulled a what? Trigger. And she said, if you buy the phone by the end of today, by 8 o'clock tonight, you will get 200 minutes of long-distance call absolutely free for the next 3 months. What did I do? I bought the phone. Okay, so it worked out really well. Okay, so what was the trigger for the baseball strike? Well, the trigger was that every week that they didn't settle, by the following Friday at 5 o'clock, an increasing amount of the money that's in Charlotte's bank would be turned over to whom? No? Charity. Charity. So by the time there's $50 million in the bank, and if you don't settle, on Friday, 25 will be turned over to charity. There's a lot of pressure. It's now more in their interest to settle than not settle. So I was really, how did they get to that? Well, I think they deconstructed it. They took that solution and they worked backwards. So the owners and the players were looking incredibly greedy. What's the opposite of greed? Charity. Now, I was always looking for research at Harvard that would show that this cooperative win-win style of negotiation was the most effective way to negotiate. And I never found it. And then I found this research by Gerald Williams. And he looked at attorneys, and they've done the study 5 times, and he says, and I think he's right, it also applies to people who aren't attorneys. Whenever they do it, they have people do an adjective checklist, and they rate up to 130 adjectives. And they had to think of attorneys in their own area of law that they thought were good, average, and not good. So it was family law, administrative law, corporate law, all the other laws. And it's always turned out the same. A little over 2/3 of the population are basically cooperative. That's your quintessential win-win negotiator. 24% are essentially aggressive. That's your quintessential win-lose negotiator. And 11% was no pattern. Well, that drove me nuts. I called him up and I said, did that mean they were cooperative sometimes and aggressive the other? He said, no pattern meant that you really couldn't tell. Now, Francis Bacon, for you philosophers, said that a prudent question is half wisdom. A prudent question is half wisdom. And the question that he says is it's not enough for us to know what our style is. We have to know how effectively we use that style. Now, our ineffective cooperatives were what percent? 3%. Let me give you the words, and you might want to write this down. These are the words that describe the ineffective cooperatives. They were gullible. They were naive. They were too trusting. And they were frequently taken advantage of. When I entered into the agreement to get Lizzie the dog, I was naive, too trusting, too gullible, and I was taken advantage of. Now, our effective negotiators, our effective cooperative negotiators, 59%. They were strategically cooperative. Strategically cooperative. They only cooperated when it made sense to do so. Strategically cooperative. Number 2, they were not afraid to use power or force. Not afraid to use power or force. And number 3, they could disagree without being disagreeable. That's the one I'm still working on. They could disagree without being disagreeable. Now, our ineffective aggressives, what was the percentage? 33, about a third. Number 1 word to describe our ineffective aggressives is obnoxious. One of these people calls you on the phone, within 30 seconds you feel like slamming down the receiver. They're obnoxious. Number 2, they are one-trick ponies. This is all in your book if you don't want to wear your hand out. They're one-trick ponies. All they know how to do is be aggressive. And number 3, if you call their bluff, you find out that they are ill what? Prepared. Our effective aggressives, 25%, 1 out of 4, were very flexible. Their preference was win-lose. But because getting a deal is better than not getting a deal, they would collaborate or compromise if they had to. Now, people don't negotiate in isolation. 2 effective cooperatives, it's a match made in heaven. It's a match made in heaven. In Mexico City, the subway, the transportation ministry, cooperated with the libraries. Now, people were reading fewer and fewer books in Mexico City, just like here. They had enough money to build 22 new libraries. They only built 3. But they built the libraries underground on the 3 subway routes. And the amount of books being used went up 5,000%. In Mexico City, they now have Book Tuesdays. You ride a bus on Mexico City, on Tuesday, there's a plastic bag in back of the bus. And if you're tired of a book, not my book, but tired of a book, you can put the book in there, and anybody's welcome to take a book out. So at no cost, the readership went up. The most amazing thing I saw in Mexico City, because I finally got to fly out of the Mexico City airport, is when you're going to fly, and before you go into the security, there's somebody that looks at it and makes a mark somewhere so they know you've been pre-screened? Everybody in Mexico City who did that was in a wheelchair. So the unemployment rate of people who are physically challenged in Canada, U.S. is 60%. So here was a perfect job, and they went out of their way to provide that kind of employment. All right, so 2 cooperatives is a match made in heaven. Now, 2 aggressives. 2 aggressives. Wayne and David. See the aggressive way he said that? It wasn't David. It was David, like you should know. And he's got a thing turned backwards. And he's blaming me. He's blaming me. Now, you might think it's a real Donnybrook, but because neither one of them will back down, and because getting a deal is better than what? Not getting a deal, they'll collaborate or compromise if they have to. The most interesting negotiations are usually those between the aggressive and the cooperative, and the aggressive will win every time unless the cooperative is effective. The 3 characteristics of master negotiators, regardless of style, is that our master negotiators, number 1, come to the table incredibly well prepared. Number 2, they're flexible. And number 3, they have incredible self-control. I'm going to illustrate that with 2 stories. One of my favorite interviews in the entire book was with Paul Tellier, President and CEO, Canadian National Railroad. Now, I put the negotiation course together for Canadian National Railroad. It took me 9 months to get the interview with Paul Tellier. I became best friends with Deb, his administrative assistant. Now, I don't know why I remember this, but the interview was 10:30 on Wednesday morning. I sent the people that I was going to interview some questions ahead of time. Out of all of the people that I interviewed, he's the only one who told me that he prepared for the interview with me the Sunday night before. Now, if he prepared for an interview with me, how much do you think he would prepare for a negotiation that would affect the future of that railroad? Incredible. Now, master leaders, master negotiators are opportunity finders. And so there are 6 major railroads in North America. And so he entered into negotiations, Canadian National Railroad entered into negotiations with Burlington Northern Santa Fe. Now, if those 2 railroads combined, it would be the most efficient and effective and largest railroad in North America. How did the other railroads feel about this? Not good. And here's the president of Canadian Pacific, and if you look at her pants, she's turned green with envy. Now, in any negotiation, there's a what? Obstacle. So Paul Tellier had to go down to Fort Worth, Texas, and meet with 5,000 Texans. Any Texans in the room? Okay, there's 4 guns for every man, woman, and child in Texas. Now, in CN's charter, it says that the head office of Canadian National Railroad has to be located in Montreal, province of Quebec, where English is not an official language. How did the Texans, the 5,000 Texans, feel about having the head office in Montreal, province of Quebec, where English is not an official language? The answer is not good. Now, you're Paul Tellier. How are you going to convince the Texans that you can make this work? I'll give you a hint. What's skill number 16? Reframe. So he went down and he said, yes, it says that the head office must be located in Montreal, province of Quebec. It doesn't say how many people have to work there. We'll have the operations center in Chicago halfway in between. He got the Texans on board. Now, the regulators on both sides of the border squelched the deal. He had worked on this for 2 years, night and day. I would have been on Prozac. And they asked Paul Tellier what his reaction was. Listen carefully. He said, I was disappointed. I was not distracted. So he comes to the table incredibly well prepared, incredible self-control. And this is why I wanted to interview him so badly. So I said, Paul, how is it you were disappointed and not distracted? And he said, Brad, there are 25,000 people who work for Canadian National Railroad, and they cannot afford for me to be distracted. Do you get a sense of the self-control that this guy has? Now, 7 days later, count them, 7 days later, it was announced in the Canadian media that Canadian National and Canadian Pacific, 2 railroads that had been bitter enemies forever. Okay, take it easy. Take it easy. We're going to share all of their track in Western Canada and save $35 million a year. Now, you cannot tell me that he put that deal together in 7 days. What does this mean? This means that he was working on 2 separate and distinctive futures for that railroad simultaneously. Incredible flexibility. Are you with me? Okay. We've already talked about choice points. Those are incredibly important points in a negotiation where if we do the right thing at the right way at the right time, it'll move forward. The wrong thing, it'll escalate, break off, or stalemate. So we're going to take a look at a case study. If you have your books with you, and I'm sure you all do, you carry them around with you, and you wanted me to sign them afterwards, and thank you very much. We've got 1 person in the room. We've got 2. Do I have 3? 3. Do I have 4? Okay. On page 73, you have a copy of the Master Negotiator's Preparation Form. And so I'm going to tell you a story, and you can see how the form was used in this negotiation. And I'm going to do this as a simulation. So one of the best training devices that we have is a simulator. So you might be the best pilot in the entire world on the Dash 8. They're not going to put you in a $47 gazillion airplane and say good luck. They'll put you in a simulator, anything would happen. So I want to do this story as a simulation. And I'm going to stop at choice points, and I'm going to ask you to be my yellow pages. I'm going to ask you to coach me. Fair enough? All right. November 3rd, 1991. My family went to the Halifax Shopping Center. We're going to Sears to get the family Christmas portrait done. And my wife is negotiating with my 4.5-year-old son, Drew, to get winter boots. He wanted the winter boots that had the Mutant Ninja Turtle decal on them that cost 10 times more than the boot that didn't have the Mutant Ninja Turtle decal on them. At the same time, my daughter Catherine, 18 months old, is in her stroller. And she sees, out of her little eye, character slippers. And character slippers look like stuffed animals. So she made a beeline to play with these, and unfortunately she tripped and fell head first. And to my horror, I could not get to her in time. And those character slippers are held up by pegboard hooks, 8 inches long, 1/4 inch round, out like this, up like this, and one of the hooks caught her in the eye. Now, it's okay. A year later, she was fine. But at the time, we didn't know that. So she's bleeding profusely from the eye. And I need a wife. Can you come up here for a second, please? Now, I am completely useless around blood. And I had no idea what to do. Now, what happened was actually quite amazing. So what Lynn did, and I don't believe in auras, but I saw this woman get total control of herself from the top of her head all the way down and became totally relaxed. She said to the person at the store, please call the IWK Children's Hospital, tell them we have an emergency. We put Andrew in the stroller, we went out, and by then it was full. I had no idea where the car was. So she calmly commandeered a station wagon with two little old ladies from Shubenacadie, and Lynn and Katie went off to the hospital. Of course, as soon as they were gone, I found the car, dropped Andrew off at some friend's house, and then went to the hospital. But this is the hero. She absolutely had total self-control until we got to the hospital, and I got there in time to see her give the hospital to give my daughter. Here's my daughter. She gave my daughter to the head nurse, and what happened?
Lost control.
She completely fell apart. Okay? Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You gonna be okay?
But that incredible self-control, because what she did for that half an hour, she stopped being Katie's mother. She became a doctor. But as soon as she gave Katie over to the nurse, she stopped being the doctor and completely fell apart. Now, we brought Katie home from the hospital. You see she had the eye patch on. She took the eye patch off prematurely, frequently fell down. And although we thought she was all right, we found out that the hook had pushed the eye back into the orbit during some neurological and muscular damage. She's holding her head to the right, can't pick things off the ground, and she's frequently falling down. Now, I wanted two things. I wanted Katie to be all right. So my first interest, we're on page 73, is I wanted Katie to be all right. My second interest is I didn't want any other families to have to go through what we went through. What would the store's interest be? Not to get sued? Very good. What else? No bad publicity? They don't want any other kids. And the cost to remedy the situation. Now, we can have the same interests, but if they're prioritized differently, then there's a negotiation. Your name is? Mark? And you are?
Nancy.
Nancy, Mark, Nancy, they're married. Now.
We've been together for a while.
Okay. Now, Mark wants to redecorate the house. He wants a new car. Nancy wants to decorate the house and wants a new car. There's only enough money for one. Which do you want the most?
The car.
The car. And you want the house, right? So what do they get? Congratulations on the new car. So we may have identical interests, but we have to really understand, and I call this understanding land. If I'm going to negotiate with Cheryl, I have to know her interests better than she does. And I need to understand how she prioritizes them better than she does. Because in this class, this means what? You can't change, come on, somebody's mind. You don't know where their mind is. Very good. Well done. I now need to prepare to negotiate with the store. We know what my interests are. We know what their interests are. What do I do? What do I need to do to prepare to negotiate with the store about the way it displays its merchandise? Who said that? How much it will cost to make a change? You are on page 74. What are the standards or objective criteria? And we know that if you buy 1,000 of the single prong hooks, they're 26 cents each. The double prong hooks that are round like this, so all the foot-pounds per square inch are on a point, twice as much metal, only 29 cents each. And scanning hooks that come out like this, where they can do the barcode, 40 cents each. What other standards or objective criteria do I need? Thank you very much for that. Okay, so yeah, it's not only the hooks, but how much would it cost to put them in? What else? What other standards or objective criteria?
The safety is like to present, how one's safer than the other.
Okay, so how much safer are these? Or how many accidents have occurred? So in the previous 18 months, there were 19 display hook related injuries. And they were keeping this data, the federal government, the Women's Association, Susan McKinsey, the Children's Hospital Injury Prevention Program, epidemiological. So there were 18 accidents, 6 of which were to the eye, 2 of which had long-term sequelae, or long-term consequences. So we know it doesn't happen very often, but for the people it does happen to, the consequences can be dire. Any other objective criteria that you would want?
Maybe emotional, maybe, oh, you mean what their...
Objective criteria that could help us build a strong case.
Well, wouldn't they have to change them at all stores if this was a chain like Sears?
Exactly.
So you would have
Right.
huge buying power for changing, like your cost of unit would go down.
Bless you. Our cost of unit would go down. So yes, it would be expensive, but, and I didn't find this out till later, we're talking in 3 chains, 10 million display hooks. What does that do for your buying power? Huge. Huge. We also, and this is too obvious for you, we wanted to check what the laws were on display safety. Now there's laws for product safety, there were no laws for display safety. And there's a question about whether or not display safety is a federal or provincial responsibility. So it could take 1,000,000 years. However, in terms of objective criteria, I went to the Canadian Ophthalmological Society, and they agreed with me that these hooks were dangerous. So that's that objective outside opinion. What else can we use here in the negotiation? So we've got our interests, we've got objective criteria. What else can help us out here?
There might be an action group already. There might be
Okay.
underlying
Okay, very good.
movement.
So we're looking at our BATNA. What's our best alternative to a negotiated agreement? So we could get an action group together, thank you very much, or I could have a lawsuit. Remember I said that 90% of what we think is culturally and linguistically determined. In the United States, your name again is?
Janet?
Janet. You can go to McDonald's, buy yourself a cup of coffee, put it in your lap, scald yourself, $2.9 million. In the United States, I'm sorry, there's a man that looked a lot like Romeo, was doing a break-in entry on a school. The skylight was painted black, fell through, severely cut himself. $16 million settlement in his favor. In the United States, there's a man that looked very much like our mayor in Vancouver, brought a Winnebago, driving down the highway, puts it on cruise control, makes himself a cup of coffee, crashes, is awarded a new Winnebago and $175 million. In the United States, they tend to overcompensate. In Canada, we tend to undercompensate. The worst thing that happened to me as a practicing psychologist, I was working with a family, really good family. They just needed a little bit of emotional support. Their daughter had leukemia. Now, she was leukemia-free, but they give them one last shot of the vincristine or the chemotherapy, because even though it's free, in one case out of 10,000, that stops it from coming back. However, it wasn't her regular doctor. It wasn't done in oncology. It was done in OR, and she was having dental work done. And the doctor didn't give her the shot intravenously. He gave it intrathecally into her spinal cord. Now, of course, she went home and was sick. By the time they brought her back, there was nothing that could be done for her. And that toxin is moving up her spinal cord, killing her off piece by piece, and the parents had to watch. They were awarded $60,000. It was an insult. Okay? So we could form an action group. And I had 26 mothers and kids with strollers that were going to go pick at the store. So we had a boycott. At BATNA, I could do nothing. So sometimes you can do these things and aggregate them, or sometimes you can do them one at a time. And my ace in the hole was our incredible Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And they agreed to do the show on Marketplace. Now, before we got that far, I wrote a letter to the Vice President of Operations, and he wrote a letter back. And I'm going to stop at a choice point. He said, clearly we have kitty hazards. What did he admit? Okay. He said, we'll look at, this is early November, we'll look at changing the displays after Christmas. Is that okay? No. And he said, under separate cover, we're sending each of your children 2 of our stuffed Christmas charity bears. Not only did I want to send them back, I wanted to send them back with 2 hooks in their eyes. Now, would that have been a smart thing to do? No. We want to be careful about burning bridges, so we gave the bears to Briney House. Now, they're bad. Now, what was their best alternative to a negotiated agreement?
To try and placate you. And they
Well, they did. Yeah, they tried to placate me, and they said, we'll have them changed within 6 months. So 6 months later, nothing happened. All right? So I decided I would call the president. The president and I played telephone tag about 3 times. They then said that the president would be out of the country, and and would I talk with the vice president of operations, the guy that wanted to send me the bears? I said yes, I would, but I wanted him to call me in a half hour at home. It's an 8-minute walk from my office to my house. Why did I change the venue or the time? More comfortable, also symbolically. This isn't a business issue. Who said control? Who said control? Absolutely. Because if he calls me a half hour later, then diagnostically I know he's taking it more seriously than he did before. I'm going to take you through that conversation. And the real reason I did it at home is because I wanted to record it. Not that I would use it legally. I didn't think I could, but I've since found out apparently in Canada only one person has to know. In the United States, both people have to know unless you're in Ohio. So you want to record somebody in the States, go to Ohio. Now, why did I record the conversation? I wanted to follow up, but even more important, not their words, my words. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me to get incredibly salient feedback about how well I negotiated about something I felt incredibly important about. And I had my yellow pages, and my wife said, don't talk too quickly, and don't get angry. And I'm going to be here to restrain you. So I'm going to take you through that conversation. And after the pleasantries, he said, what would you like us to do? And I said, I would like you to remove those hooks from your stores. He said, I'm not sure that's practical or possible. What do I say? Oh, okay, that's one option. That's one option.
But you said you already told me that.
No, I can't get aggressive. He said it's not practical or possible. What does this mean in this class? You can't change somebody's mind. So please help me understand. Please help me understand how it isn't practical or possible. Please, I want to find out what he's thinking. Not why. The word why tends to be
Confrontational.
confrontational. You know? So there's my wife, and here's Katie. Why can't you make her look after this dog? Now I've got both people mad at me. All right, so please help me understand how it isn't practical or possible. Because I can't change somebody's mind if?
Oh, gosh.
I don't know where his mind is. Yeah, I know you were going to say it in Spanish. All right. Now, he then said, I don't mean to be a smart ass, but frankly we have more accidents on escalators and elevators. So I'm going to teach you how to combine 2 skills, and this is called, Romeo, would you help me please? This is called negotiation jiu-jitsu. Okay? So we're going to combine 2 skills. What does this mean?
I don't know what your mind is.
I can't change somebody's mind to know where their mind is. Okay. Now, are you a good listener?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want you to listen more carefully than you've listened to anybody in your entire life, all right?
Okay.
I want you to come at me as if you are going to hit me in the face. As if. Got it? Okay. You are going to stop. Now, are you metric or imperial?
Metric, I guess.
Metric. Okay, you're going to stop exactly 42 centimeters. That's about this far before impact.
Okay.
Okay, and you're going to freeze.
All right.
So you're going to come at me as if you were going to do what? Hit me in the
and
face. Okay. You're going to do what?
I'm going to stop at about 42 meters.
No.
guess I'm not that.
I need a new helper. Okay, 42 centimeters.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're going to freeze. I did this in Calgary. The guy was actually a karate expert. Didn't listen well, and you can maybe see the surgery. Okay, so go ahead. Okay, perfect. Now I can do that and break both our hands. Negotiation jiu-jitsu, I take the elbow, I take the risk, and I move the force in the direction I want it to go in. So this is, you can't change somebody's mind into their mind is, come at me with the force and freeze, and then this is negotiation jiu-jitsu. So he said, frankly, we have more accidents on elevators and escalators. So I said, please help me understand how you're protecting children from accidents on escalators and elevators. Right? He said, our safety committee is looking into it and we put up signs. Come at me with the fist. Can the safety committee look into this issue and put up signs? For him to say no, whose logic is he refuting? His own. All right. He then said, don't go away, you're doing a great job. As her father, you are partially responsible for her injury. I wanted to kill him. Can I borrow this for a second? Okay. Now this is called, number 17 on the bookmark is disarming. Okay, so you've got a stick. And this comes from a book called Nasty People by Jay Carter, How to Deal with Them Without Becoming One of Them. And you saved your firm gazillions of dollars. They've given you enough money to study anything you want to study anywhere in the world. Bernard is really smart. He says, I'm going to study Zen Buddhism with a Buddhist monk on Mount Fuji, and I'm going to attain Satori or enlightenment. So we're on Mount Fuji. I'm the Buddhist monk, and I give you a cup of tea, and you bow gracefully. And I say, if you drink the cup of tea, I'm going to hit you with the stick. If you don't drink the cup of tea, I'm going to hit you with the stick. What do? You reach up with your free hand, and you gently take the stick. That's disarming. So he said, as her father, you are partially responsible for her accident. What do I say? I agree. So I've disarmed. So then what can you do as a store, and what can we do as parents to prevent this from happening again? So the only way to move is forward. So this is, you can't, come on everybody, you can't change someone's mind. You can't change somebody's mind to know their mind is. Come at me with the force. This is negotiation, jiu-jitsu. And this is disarming. Well done. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not your pen. Okay. To make a long story short, we went on CBC Marketplace. I became a shareholder. I became a member of the board of directors. Sorry, not yet. I became a shareholder. But as a shareholder, I could write to the store. I explained what happened. And I wrote a very getting to yes kind of letter. I said, my purpose isn't to be adversarial. I would rather work with the store so that it could be a leader in protecting Canada's children. I got a letter that morning from the president and CEO saying that within 7 days, count them, 7 days, 10 million display hooks would be changed and bent back and be made safer until they could be replaced. What did I learn from this? I learned that we can be a principled negotiator. I could be cooperative. I had to use a great deal of force, and I disagreed without being disagreeable. I was then able to ask him if they could make that device to bend those display hooks back available to every other store in Canada at cost, and he said yes. I then went after Sony, and Sony sent me a letter and setting precedents. They removed all of their single-prong hooks, but they destroyed them so nobody else could use them. And they made a $500 donation to the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. I then went after the Gap. The Gap has changed their hooks worldwide. Last story. The book Getting to Yes ends with this story. There's a man named Roger Fisher who was playing Frisbee in Hyde Park, London. A Britisher came up to him, and this is 40 years ago. Nobody ever seen that strange sport before. He said, sorry to bother you, who's winning? In most cases, to ask a negotiator who's winning is as inappropriate as to ask who's winning a marriage or a very important personal relationship. Because you have to ask that question, you've already lost the most important negotiation, and that's how we will deal with our shared and differing interests. So it's my hope that this introduction to being master negotiator will help all of us, me included, so we can be more effective in our shared and differing interests at home at work in our provinces, in our beloved country of Canada, and indeed is the events of September 11th in the United States, March 11th in Madrid, Spain, July 7th in London, England, September 1st in Dresden, Russia, and last November in India indicate we absolutely have to do a better job of dealing with our shared interests internationally. So in your efforts to negotiate and to continue to help make the world a better place, I wish you Godspeed. Thank you very much for being such a great audience. Oh, you're too kind. I do have other books. They're $20 each, and I'm the principal supplier of funds for Swim Jamaica. So if you want to help inner city kids in Jamaica and get great books, we have the Master Leaders, we have the Master Presenters, and a really sweet book called From Our Grandmother's Lap, Lessons for a Lifetime. Thank you again. And thanks to Romeo.